How's going guys, welcome to the channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the Vulpine Sinner and got Harem and Helluva boss? Part 2. If you wants to see awesome fanfiction like this, don't forget to subscribe. Now let's get into the video. There are times where life-changing events occur in someone's existence, whether it be comfortable or unsettling, which can twist it around, making them believe it was merely a dream or some odd hallucination of fears, insecurities, aspirations taking form. That they may come to an end like waking up from an alarm and returning to one's normal everyday life. For Naruto Uzumaki, this happened several times in his existence. Some affected him far more than the rest. In recent years, it was him dying as a human and having a literal new lease on life as a sinner in hell. And far more recently was him having a new job occupation. It had been several weeks since the Vulpine Sinner hand joined the dysfunctional group that was I.M.P. Something that'll take quite some time to get used to. Currently said sinner was transporting and loading some bags filled to the brim with guns, ammo, knives, swords, and a freaking double-headed battle axe into the van of his new boss. They were in hell. It's practically required to be prepared to have weapons on hand, even in one's vehicle at a moment's notice. There was a reason why one of the unofficial mottos of hell was "It's not a kill if it's not overkill after all." Before Naruto could be sent out on field missions with the rest of the crew, he had to get properly trained in a whole variety of ways. Sure, he got experience on how to clean up a crime scene or at least making one for a client specification for a job. But there was also the finer detail on him being able to use weapons effectively when out on the field. After all, he is now working for an assassin's firm. While hand-to-hand combat and melee weapons was one thing, firearms training was another. It wouldn't do him much good if he didn't know how to properly use and maintain a gun, let alone the vast arsenal I.M.P has in their storage locker. Naruto may not be an assassin yet, but he was and still is a bodyguard. So he'll need to keep an eye out on his I.M.P coworkers and being sure they make it out alive. Besides, such tools of the trade will be beneficial in the long run if and when he finds other work outside of I.M.P. At least I have a good teacher. Naruto thought, loading and inspecting the last of the equipment in the company, more like Blitzo's van. Moxie is quite the weapons expert, more towards firearms. You can literally pass the time with him if you bring up anything gun-related. Something new on the market. Moxie would do comparisons and reviews once thoroughly inspecting it either in person or on Weapons Monthly. And since he was all but ordered by Blitzo to train Naruto on them, the one I.M.P was quite the mentor to the sinner. Of course he was also equally as passionate with the musical and stage arts. Though his taste of musical theater is iffy at times as he was more aligned towards classical works. And being iffy, it's just some shows he recommended are rather questioning. Heading back into the building, Naruto pondered slightly when getting back to the 6th floor. Should I ask Millie for another spar today? I need a good workout. Mill was quite the sturdy fish, which was quite the compliment to Moxie's wife. She's more of a physical fighter, given she was born and raised in Wrath. While her husband was more into guns, Millie was more into bladed weapons such as knives, swords, axes, etc. Quite agile and strong, she was able to give the Vulpine Sinner a run for his money. All the training and preparation Naruto got from the married couple was to get him ready for his upcoming assignments. And eventually going into the human realm at some point had Naruto be rather nervous. Outside of a whole plethora of thoughts on the matter of returning to the living world after over a year, the Vulpine Sinner was concerned that eventually returning there would get him and the others in trouble. Turns out Blitzo doesn't really give a s. He'd bend or break the rules just for a profit. So if that meant Naruto straining things on assignments, then so be it. That being the case until he can join the other I.M.Ps in field work, Naruto was being given a variety of gopher jobs for them. Going out to acquire materials and supplies for future assignments. Not much different from what he did at first under Verosika's employ before Milky took that series of duties. Yet he needed to be extra careful in handling all that. After all, he was working with weapons, explosives and a whole plethora of items to kill people with. The Vulpine Sinner really didn't want to know in which ways Blitzo or others would use the bear traps he got the other day to kill someone. Back in the office, Naruto found it relatively quiet. Outside of some music playing from a hellphone nearby, the amount of commotion was absent. They're out on a job already? He asks as it would make sense as to why Millie, Moxie and Blitzo were gone while Luna wasn't. You just missed him, said Luna, sitting at the receptionist desk and watching a music video on her hellphone. You took your sweet time, Naruto. She remarks, giving him a brief glance before turning her attention back to her phone. I didn't really take my sweet time, Luna. Blitz had a lot for me to load into his van. Naruto went over to the couch and laid there. I swear, it's like he's gearing up for Extermination Day or a turf war with the amount I put in there. Not really. He just wants to be prepared. Luna put her phone down to look at the sinner. Last time he didn't have S in the van, we were ambushed by a biker gang fatty unintentionally pissed off. Naruto raised a brow. Not because of Luna's nickname for Moxie, but with the obvious detail. "What'd he do?" he asks. "Don't know the specifics. All I know, they took an exception to whatever Fatty was spouting and were insulted." The hellhound puffed out a bit of air. "Had a hard time dealing with them. So Blitz makes sure the van's loaded for another situation like that." She adds with a roll of her eyes as leave it to Moxie to cause a shootout over something he said. "I can understand that, but what if the van gets stolen?" Naruto asks with a raised eyebrow as a van loaded with a bunch of weapons was a tempting target in hell. "Why would anyone want to steal a crappy van like that?" Luna counters with a deadpan look on her face. "Point taken." Naruto replies as he sits on the receptionist's desk and sees the relatively simple layout from the computer, desk phone among other items. Yet there was the addition of a switchboard with a few lights attached with labels reading the following: deranged client, more coffee, soiled my pants, horny client, client giving birth, ghost, and stolas. Each of them were connected to Blitzo's office desk for several warnings if he can't get Luna's attention on the fly. "Since there's not much to do now, wanna do something?" he asks the hellhound. Other than going on gopher runs for supplies, Naruto mainly just helped out around the office. Instead of just sitting around and waiting for Blitzo, Millie and Moxie to return from a mission for the majority of the time, Naruto hung out with Luna. It was honestly the only way to relatively help pass the moments and kill their boredom when there was nothing else to do aside from waiting for potential clients to show up. The hellhound pondered slightly as she didn't exactly have anything on her mind. All she responded with was a shrug. Seeing her response, Naruto slumped slightly before a passing thought came to mind. "Yak no, I think I want to take a look at the grimoire if that's fine with you," he says with a shrug, thinking it would be a somewhat interesting way to pass the time. Pulling out the grimoire of Stola's Gosha from the drawer, Luna handed it over to the Vulpine Sinner. "Knock yourself out," she says, tossing the book to the Sinner. As it turns out, after an unspecified amount of time in hell, a Sinner can start to develop a plethora of abilities. It all depends on the individual in question, and some abilities manifest, developed or learned. In Naruto's case, he had only bothered to learn of his physical capabilities and limitations for his time being Verosika's bodyguard. However, since I.M.P has access to Stola's grimoire, he can explore other possibilities. He did feel bad looking through the Gosha grimoire, as he didn't have permission. Yet his curiosity got the better of him as this was here to more or less exploit. "Okay, let's see." Naruto's eyes scrolled about as he flipped through the pages. "Human disguise. Sounds interesting," he says, spotting said spell on one of the book's pages. Reaching through the entry, the Sinner took into the details of the incantation while envisioning something he hadn't seen in over a year. Taking all that into account, he went to work. With a brief light show, smoke and flames surrounded Naruto's form. As it dispersed, his vulpine appearance was replaced by something else. Something familiar, yet alien to him. A white sclera, blue-eyed blonde human with peach skin and whisker-marked cheeks. His clothes were slightly altered as they appeared to be redesigned to help sell off his appearance, on top of him now wearing shoes. Checking himself at the nearby mirror, he comments. "This feels weird seeing myself like this after all this time." "Is that what you looked like when you were alive?" Luna asked, earning a nod in response. The hellhound had to admit, Naruto was attractive in both his vulpine and human forms. Her tail swayed in response as her mouth curled upward slightly. "This will be useful for later," the Sinner said as he inspected himself a tad more. "Oh yeah?" Luna chuckled out, her eyes drinking up his form. "Can't imagine you going out there, not as a human," she remarks as it would be completely idiotic for someone to go up to the human realm and not have a disguise on. "That'll be awkward, that's for sure." Naruto recalls the one spell to return him to his Sinner appearance, having his body morph back in the process. "Gonna take some time to get this down," he says as it would definitely not only take practice to get the spell down, but also used to the fact that he could turn back to his human form. Luna, seeing him back in his vulpine form, leans forward on her desk, allowing part of her valleyed friezes to be seen from the top of her shirt. "I can show you, if you'd like," she says, offering to help him out. Hellhounds and the incubus succubus have the natural trait to being able to have a human disguise, as opposed to the other hellborn. For the canine species, it's due to their roots of them essentially being bounty hunters when a human's demon deal came to an end and their lives needed to be collected to fulfill their end of the bargain. For the incubus and succubus, they go topside to spread all sorts of lust and influence among other factors. And both aforementioned species needed human appearances to better blend with the populace to do their jobs. "You will?" Naruto asks and gets a smile from her, thus having his smile more in the process. He all but moves forward and is nearly close to her, startling the hellhound slightly. Especially with the odd sparkles emanating from his eyes. "Sweet. That'll be awesome," the Sinner shouts with a cheer. A bit flustered, Luna pulls back a bit in her seat. Yeah, sure. Whatever." she says a bit shyly while brushing some of her hair behind her ear. So how do we start? Naruto asks with an eager and excited look on his face. Compassing herself, Luna moves away from the desk and begins the lesson. It goes like this as she begins teaching the Vulpine Sinner some tricks to the spell. From here, time passes for the pair as Luna helps Naruto nail down his human disguise and maintain it with a number of tips and tricks. Sounds like you know how to do it. Naruto remarks as he listens to the Hellhound explain in detail some of the tips and tricks behind the disguise spell. As I know how to do mine. Luna remarks with a bit of a smug grin, rather proud of her having a human disguise. Naruto blinked in surprise upon hearing this. You have a human disguise? He asks in slight shock that she had a human disguise. Luna nods and with a blue flash of flames, her body morphed into what appeared to be a pale-skinned goth teenager that was greatly similar to her natural appearance. Her eye colors are inverted as she has white sclera with wider eyes and redder eyes and has a visible belly button. Her height shrunk and slimmed down slightly, making her average in terms of human aesthetics. Her outfit is the same as before, but with the addition of black thigh-high socks and high-top sneakers and black lipstick and eyeliner. Her choker also lost its spikes, and in place of her torn right ear, she now has 2 earrings placed there. And to finish off her look, she has an undercut on the right side of her head, while the rest of her long silver hair is swept over the left. So, what you think? She asks with a slight smirk and a beep of her hips. Hot. Naruto says suddenly before realizing what he blurted out. Wait, fuck, I meant to say great. You look great. He admits before he covers his face in embarrassment at what he had said unintentionally. Luna giggles a little on his blunder as her cheeks flare a little in heat. She liked the compliment and tucked a loose strand of hair back in the process. Turning back to her Hellhound form, the Hellhound asks, so what you want to do now? Looking at the wall clock, Naruto saw the time and had an idea. Wanna go out for lunch? My treat. He offers with a shrug, thinking they probably still had some time before the others finished their job. Noticing the time as well, Luna thought it was good as her tail wagged a little more. Beats being stuck here. The Hellhound admits as anything would be more entertaining than just waiting in the office. Naruto gives her a vulpine smile. Sounds like a plan, he says as the two begin to leave the office. However, as they do so, an all too familiar screaming ringtone was then heard from Luna's hellphone. Groaning a little, she picked it up and answered. What is it, Blitz? The Hellhound says in annoyance at the interruption to her getting to hang out more with the Vulpine Sinner. We're done with the job, sweetie. Portal us up. Blitzo is heard saying over the speaker of the phone. Ending the call, Luna flipped through the Grimoire's pages to a bookmarked page. From there, she read aloud some incantation which caused the Grimoire to glow. Some feet away, a portal opened up where Millie, Moxie and Blitzo strolled on through. Another successful job in the books. The taller imp says with a grin as he sent Luna several photos of the proof of kill. Contact the client of a job well done. The Hellhound sighs a little in a bored fashion as she begins texting the client in a message thread. Already on it. With another job done and over with, the rest of the payment for their services will be underway by the end of the day or sometime tomorrow. Depending on the client, they were paid half up front with the remainder when the job was finished or all up front. Seeing nothing else brought up at all, Naruto speaks up towards his Hellhound coworker. Ready to go. Luna grabs her purse and heads over with a little pep to her step. Yoop. She says, putting the emphasis on the P. Blitzo looked at this and was momentarily confused. Wait, where are you two going? He asks, not liking the idea of his adoptive daughter hanging out alone with the Vulpine Sinner. Lunch. Was Luna's response as she gives the imp a dismissive wave that turns into a middle finger from around the doorframe as she and Naruto exit the office. We'll be back in an hour. Naruto called out before closing the door. Hearing this, the former circus performer fumed. Now wait just a minute. He attempts to go out to stop them when one employee gets in his way. You sure it's a good idea, sir? Moxie speaks out. To just stop them from going out. There's plenty of food in the break room. Says Blitzo. They can have their lunch there. He adds, countering the reason to Naruto and Luna leaving the building alone and together. The very thought of which caused the imp to grind his teeth in rage as various images of what the Vulpine Sinner could do with her to his loony. Blitz, she's a grown-ass woman. Millie interjects. She doesn't need your permission for simple things like going out for lunch with a coworker. Would you even be fine if she hangs out with other people? Moxie asks with a questioning look on his face. Yes, Blitzo begins to say only to be interrupted. Without butting into her privacy, Moxie finishes off. Hearing no verbal response from his boss, the smaller imp hums. Thought so. Over with the Hellhound and Sinner, the pair had a good time at a steakhouse. Sure, Naruto paid for the meal, but Luna picked where they'd go. While it was a tad much, given how well the steaks were, it was well worth it. The two enjoyed themselves and this would become an occasional thing between them every so often. Next day. It was Naruto's day off from work and as a result it was his little errand day. There wasn't much of what he could do, aside from the basics. Laundry, shopping, cleaning, calling Verosika at the rehab center and sloth, trying not to get killed by some gangbanger passing by while out and about. That last one was an odd addition of what he had to deal with since coming into hell. Not exactly a chore, but just a reminder of what he needs to be wary of. What should I do after this? He asked himself as he was entering Hellmart's parking. I could watch a few of the shows Moxie and Millie recommended. The day just started and the Vulpine Sinner was distracted from his thoughts as he heard a scream coming from up above. Looking towards the source, the Vulpine Sinner saw someone falling from the sky. The new arrival. He thought with a grimacing frown. Such a thing here in Pride wasn't new. It usually happened moreover in Pentagram City, while less common in the other Pride regions. The figure started to grow larger and larger by the second before realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Oh wait, crap. This person ended up falling on top of him. Or would have if Naruto hadn't acted quickly and caught them before they hit the pavement. The newly arrived sinner had a curvy body with modest perky breasts, slim waist and a bit taller than Blitzo. She had violet skin, pointy ears, red sclera with small slit yellow pupils behind a pair of glasses with sharp yellow teeth. Her once human legs and feet had been replaced with digitigrade goat-like legs and hooves, goat-like purple horns, and her long hair is pale white, which was held back by a scarf-like black scrunchie. Her attire consisted of a creamy white blouse with cherry print into the fabric, a jade brooch resting on her breasts, and a large blue skirt, which barely showed her now present hooved feet. She was shaking like a leaf. Utter confusion and terror was outright visible for Naruto to see. Hey, it's alright. You're relatively safe now, he says trying to calm the new arrival to hell down. Where am I? The sinner asks in fright looking around at her surroundings and the vulpine creature currently holding her. You're in hell. Naruto states not sugarcoating anything as it would be best to rip off the band-aid, so to speak and just tell her how it is. I am? Her eyes were unfocused, having her recollect what just happened. In a matter of moments, she brought her hands to her mouth and gasped aloud. Oh god that's right, I died. She utters in shock the events leading up to where she finds herself now returning to her mind. She then remembered that she was currently in the arms of the blonde-furred Vulpine Sinner. Can you put me down? He complied, gently bringing her down to her feet, her hooves. Thank you. She adds thanking him for catching her as she had a feeling it would have hurt quite a bit if she had hit the ground. It's no problem. I was in the same shoes you were over a year ago. Naruto says with a shrug, clearly shrugging off her thanks as it wasn't a big deal that he caught her. So what's your name? He asks his fellow sinner. It's Madeline Mayberry. The female sinner says introducing herself to the Vulpine Sinner. Naruto Uzumaki. He says greeting her formally. Hearing his name, a bit of recollection surfaces in her mind. Eyes widening in utter surprise. Her body stiffens, which is reflective with the tail she apparently has jetting upwards in alarm. Naruto? She asks a little hesitantly. Yeah? Naruto replies a little confused at the questioning tone of her voice. Do you remember how you died? Mayberry asks, her eyes widening a bit behind her glasses. Yeah, I do. He said, missing her one reaction. I got shot trying to save someone from getting mugged and raped. She ran off as I bled out in an alley. He suddenly felt her hugging him rather tightly. Looking down, he saw her beginning to cry. What's wrong? It's you. Her voice sounded broken, adding a bit of confusion. You saved me. Mayberry says softly with her face buried in some fur of his chest. You saved me that day. For some moments, the confusion he bore gave way when he inspected Mayberry a bit more. In his mind's eye, he can remember a blonde, green-eyed woman wearing similar glasses. In a matter of moments, such human features shifted to the sinner before him. Well I'll be blessed. He chuckled bitterly. Never would have thought I'd see you again, let alone down here. Naruto remarks in a bit of ironic disbelief that he would reunite with the person he saved, let alone in hell. Same. She said nervously as she fidgeted a bit before pulling herself away from him, despite how warm and comfy his chest felt. Looking at their present location, Naruto scrunched his face a little. We should talk somewhere else. Somewhere a tad more comfortable. He says as the parking lot of a Hellmart was hardly a safe place in hell. Speaking of the store, Naruto had to deadpan at what was clearly a hell version of the store of a similar name from the human realm. According to Verosika, who he had asked after first seeing the store, it was due to the founder of said similar sounding name ending up in hell and restarting the chain here under a new name, go figure. Though the Vulpine Sinner had to be honest, if he saw Cola Express down here he was calling bullshit. Madeline nodded, following her savior twice over to a diner where he paid for their meal and sat at a corner booth so they could privately talk. I attended your funeral. Mayberry said, nursing herself with a cup of coffee. It was the least I could do to repay what you did. She adds, staring down at the black liquid in shame, partly blaming herself for his death. They even caught the man who did it. Though I remember hearing he got shanked in prison in some brawl. Thank you for letting me know. His voice was low. I doubt many people attended. He saw her shake her head a little. Thought so. He remarks with a dry chuckle, as he would have been surprised if more than a handful of people had attended. You didn't have any family from what I learned. Hardly had any friends. Mayberry remarks as she had been shocked to learn that her savior that night had hardly anyone in his life to attend the funeral. Rather hard given I hardly had a social life. Naruto remarks with a humorless chuckle as he had spent so much time working and helping others, he didn't have much of a social life. Though I have definitely been making up for it since coming to hell, he thinks to himself, as working for Verasika had definitely given him a social life to say the least. The sinner then realizes something. Sorry if I'm intruding, but how did you die exactly? He asks her, more than a little curious as to how she met her end. Mayberry sighs, looking at her hand and spotting the ring on her finger. Her eyes narrowed at it and slipped it off with a restrained growl. She would have tossed it away, but didn't want to draw attention in their present location. Bad breakup? Naruto asks with a raised brow, figuring it must have been given the way she was glaring at the ring with such intensity he half expected it to burst into flames and melt. Cheating bastard. She cursed as she soon explained. I forgot it was my husband's birthday. So I ended up making a video call with my students to wish him one, and her fists tightened significantly. He unintentionally answered, having us see him fucking the slut in our bed. She breaks out a sob. We were trying so long and hard to have a baby, and he ended up cheating on me. The Vulpine Sinner frowns. He reaches out and gently grasps her hand, which she tightens her hold on it. I reacted badly. I left the school and drove straight home. I shot them both, not realizing the video call was still up. I killed myself right after, as I was overcome by my guilt of destroying my image towards my precious students. She reveals, nearly in tears, at what she had done, not in regards to the cheating fucker that was her now ex-husband and the whore he was with, but the fact that she hurt one of her students and they saw everything she did. It's not your fault, Madeline. Naruto says soothingly. I should have listened to them. I should have reacted better, and oh god, little Samantha. I grabbed her by her throat and threw her into the ceiling. Mayberry sobs out in realized horror at how she had not only put her hands on one of her precious students, but also hurt her. Naruto cringed when hearing this particular detail. Even wondering how Madeline was capable of pulling off such a feat while as a human. What happened to her was an accident. He says, trying to comfort the woman. But I still harmed a child. Madeline cries out with tears leaking from the corner of her eyes. Naruto frowned at this, knowing the act of harming the child will weigh on Madeline's soul for quite some time. A child entrusted into her care to teach and watch over when she was alive. She'll need time to process and learn to accept it before moving on. After all, she's got all the time in the afterlife now. He thought to himself. In the means of getting the new sinner distracted from her one thoughts, Naruto got Madeline caught up to speed about hell, along with many of its rules and complicated details. With this all said and done, Madeline digested everything, as she'll need to live through the new norm of her existence. Yet it would now bring up many issues for her as a new arrival. Predicting and guessing what was floating around the new sinner's head, like history repeated itself, Naruto asked her a question he was relatively asked before a little over a year ago. Can I ask you something? The Vulpine Sinner remarks with a slight smirk on his face. Yes. Mayberry replies with a questioning look, curious as to what the fellow sinner wanted to ask her. Wanna stay with me for a while? Naruto asks, causing Mayberry's eyes to widen in shock at the sudden offer. A few days later. Some time had passed as Madeline started living with him. It was rather unconventional, but he didn't want to see her living on the streets after arriving in hell. She was like him when he arrived over a year ago, no job and no place to live, and would have likely been that way for some time had he not met Verasika on that very same day. Naruto didn't want to press his luck for Madeline to find a job and place to live on her own, so he made a kind act to help her out, like what he did before when he was alive. The new sinner didn't want to impose, but Naruto insisted. So until she was able to get back onto her feet, Madeline was his roommate. His apartment was rather quaint despite its rather small size. It basically consisted of a living room connected to an open-concept kitchen. Off to the side of the living room was a small halfway room leading to the small single bathroom on one side, while on the opposite side of the hall was the single bedroom of the apartment. In the living room he had put up several pictures of himself and Verasika, along with some of them and the rest of her crew. The bed was queen-sized, which helped as Naruto tossed and turned a lot in his sleep as of late. Though he mostly blamed Verasika for not being by his side after essentially conditioning him to only be comfortable when he had a bedmate. One side of his closet and drawers were now reserved for Madeline for an assortment of clothes he helped buy for her. Of course, for the time being, Naruto slept on the couch while she took the bed. Once again, she felt bad about what he was doing but was touched by him doing such kind acts for her. While she had nothing to properly repay him with, she decided to help clean the apartment and do some errands to somewhat help cover her part of the rent and utilities. And she was more focused on such tasks, given she was unsuccessful in finding a job for the time being. In the kitchen, there were the standard sort of appliances with a few additions like a coffee maker for instance. More would have been here, yet Naruto left them back in Verosika's luxury apartment back in Lust. However, there was a bit of an overhaul in the kitchen stock of food and supplies when Naruto got his new roommate. Reason why is simply put. Flashback 2 days ago. This cannot be all you have here. Madeline exclaims in disbelief as she opens up the cupboards in the kitchen to see what she could make Naruto for them. Her wanting to make the Vulpine Sinner dinner was something she wanted to do to begin paying him back for giving the new resident of Hell a place to stay. Hearing the exclamation, Naruto glanced over, seeing Madeline going through the cupboards. It's not. He remarks with a dry look on his face. Then where's the real food? Mayberry asks with a raised eyebrow. In the fridge. Naruto remarks with a deadpan look on his face. Which serves as breakfast and snacks. The female sinner looks back with a credulous look. Seriously, you cannot expect me to have ramen of all things for lunch and dinner. She remarks in slight disbelief as in several pantries, there were cases, bowls and containers of nothing but ramen packets. Sorry, but I haven't had time to go shopping yet, for Naruto begins to say before he is interrupted. I am not having any of this unhealthy filth. Mayberry says with a disgusted look on her face. The gasp was loudly made. You take that back. Ramen is sacred. Naruto protests in shock and outrage as the two begin bickering about the pros and cons of ramen. Then flashback. For argument's sake, despite living with Verosika for a year, he had quite the habit of keeping a supply of ramen on hand. A guilty pleasure for him when he wasn't spending a lot of time cooking. A factor he greatly fell back on over the years when growing up. Yet after moving out, Naruto relapsed in a way when he got a bit lazy when it came to food. Seems he needed someone living with him to keep him right on track. Thus they had to do a big grocery run to be sure everything was set for Madeline's standards. It wasn't as if he was tight on money to cover such expenses. With his former job as Verosika's bodyguard among other factors, he was relatively well off. So he could be able to splurge more to get better food for them. The same applied with living arrangements. However, it was just offers of rent on past choices when moving back into Pride before his present living conditions were ridiculous from hidden clauses and the like to make it ludicrously expensive. Thankfully, he acquired help and assistance from Moxie and Millie, who became his neighbors at the apartment complex. Of course, since he was living nearby them, Naruto was all the more cautious of Blitzo making a surprise intrusion when not at work. He didn't know the reason for Blitzo's continuous habit towards Moxie and Millie, yet he may have an idea towards himself, given the tall imp didn't like him being around Luna. So for the time being, Naruto had to keep himself quiet on his address for his privacy's sakes. But forms of entertainment, Naruto let Madeline access his streaming accounts. There was quite the number he had through Verosika's connections. And they helped keep his new roommate entertained while she cooked, cleaned and was working through applications. For surprising detail, Hell apparently has access to C channels and other media over in the human realm. Not to mention a few channels over in heaven, courtesy of Lord Lucifer. From what the Vulpine Sinner had heard from Octavia, there was even a rumor that the reason behind heaven channels was due to Lucifer pirating heaven's cable without them knowing. But the odd form of accessing media on the other side, Naruto looked up information about Madeline killing her husband and the woman he was cheating with. Call it a breach of privacy or something similar, but he was curious. His curiosity ended up causing a bit of a reaction, more so for Madeline with what they learned. She survived. The female sinner roars in absolute rage with a fiery aura flaring up around her as her hair waves about wildly. The video of a news coverage showed the whore Martha, who was all bandaged up and recovering in a hospital bed. Surrounding her hospital room was a large assortment of colorful flowers with her 2 children and husband by her bedside. The husband was a hulking figure despite being seated, which the 2 guessed was around 6.5 feet tall with a muscular frame. His light brown hair with a slight gray streak on the sides was slicked back as he wore a red plaid shirt with the sleeves rolled up with blue jeans and boots. The children were simple enough, with the son having dirty blonde hair while the daughter had light brown hair. Martha, you miraculously survived a gunshot to the head. How does it feel to have survived such a crazy bitch? Asked a female news reporter. The bandaged woman frowned. I just hope that sick woman finally found peace. She remarks in a clearly false-sounding sympathetic tone. You're so brave. Here's $2 million. One of the reporters in the room says, suddenly pulling out a giant check. Both Martha and her family were outright surprised at the generous amount they received as they were handed a giant display check. Oh, thank you. She gleefully says as she and her family embraced each other. After seeing the video, the pair looked through an assortment of news articles relating to the incident. Each and every one had Madeline's emotions swirl into a frenzy. Talk shows, interviews and donations made Martha's popularity soar, which resulted in her making so much goddamn cash she and her family were living the high life in the wilderness. Not to mention Martha spun a tale that she was seduced by Madeline's husband, all the while dragging the teacher's reputation through the dirt. For the biggest insult to injury, Martha became the new teacher of the students Madeline used to teach. That lying, thieving whore. Madeline growled out as some intimidating aura rolled off her body. She's not a hero. She screamed in rage as she threw stuff around the apartment, breaking things in the process. During all this, Naruto began ducking and leaping away from the thrown objects. Madeline. Calm down. He soon says, coming up to her to restrain her from breaking more of the apartment. No. I can't calm down. That skank is ruining all I've made in life. The teacher sinner hissed out, literally and figuratively like a rattlesnake. If it was possible to go back and kill her I would. Frowning a little, Naruto released a sigh. Funny you should say that. She turned to him questionably. My job covers that. He says sheepishly, causing her to raise an eyebrow in interest at the reveal. Next day. After making a withdrawal from the bank, Naruto gave the money to Mayberry so she can properly hire I.M.P services to take care of her revenge. It was a bit unnecessary, but it was the easiest way to not have Naruto deal with extra issues with Blitzo in negotiating a way to take on the job. After some slight introductions to Blitzo, Madeline was escorted into his office while Moxie, Millie, Luna and Naruto hanged out in the common area. What are you guys doing? Naruto asked from the side. Target practice, said Millie, who was waving her tail while Moxie was fiddling with a crossbow behind the receptionist desk. And why is Luna holding a photo? The Vulpine Sinner looked to see Luna lying on the couch with her arm extended and holding a small photo of a human family. It's the target. Millie remarks casually as if she was talking about the weather. Why are you using her as a placement holder? Naruto asks with a deadpan look on his face. 'Cause she's got nothing better to do. Millie responded before seeing her husband's arms quivering. Honey, stop shaking. You're gonna shoot our only hellhound. She says, chiding her husband a bit. Wow, I feel so loved here. Luna says in a bored tone, all the while using her other hand to look things up on her hellphone. Wouldn't it be better to have the target hung up like with the rest? Naruto asked, coming over to the couch and snatching it out of the hellhound's hand. Also really, why this photo in particular? He then noticed the direction of the crossbow aimed towards him. Do not aim that at me. He shouts in alarm as it was common sense to not point a loaded weapon at someone unless you intended to shoot them. In that short order, thought will be best for moving targets. So boring when stationary. Millie states before focusing on her husband and instructs him. Just take a deep breath and let it out. Still doesn't answer about the photo. I mean, does it have to be one of a nice looking family? Naruto moves a bit more, seeing Moxie keeping his shaky sights on the photo. Eyes off the target, Mox. But that, the one imp moved the crossbow out of the way with a nervous smile. Sorry Naruto. He turns to his wife. Under what circumstances would we need to kill a human family? Millie didn't see what the big deal was. If that's what the client wants she callously shrugs with. Moxie, however, had trouble coming to terms with that. Maybe a shitty dad. He scratches his head with the back of his crossbow. Or a mob family, that's understandable. He adds in, doing an impression of Marlon Brando. But to eradicate an entire innocent or seemingly by the photo upper middle class family bloodline. He asks, always wanting to find logic in executing someone. After all, he's prepared to kill, but can't fathom the case of whipping out an entire bloodline seemed rather excessive. He did have more class than that. Luna rolled her eyes at this, having enough of the moral bullshit Fatty was spouting. Snatching the photo from Naruto's grasp, she took a proper look at the individuals and made her own conclusions. Hey, you don't know they're innocent. She argues, having her finger going to just about every member of the family. This kid probably sets dogs on fire. Maybe this girl gets off on bullying Australian kids online. The mom cheats on a regular basis. And the dad definitely watches, most likely from the closet and dressed as Superman. Watches what? Naruto asks rather curiously. Are you saying he has a cuckold fetish or something? He remarks, confused by what the hellhound meant. Come on, you know what? Luna says with a knowing and her sly look on her face. No, I don't. Also those were oddly specific descriptions earlier, Luna. Was the response of the Vulpine Sinner. I have a very expanded mindset. Besides, you don't know what most kids do these days. Luna counters with a shrug of her shoulders. Fair enough. Naruto admits after a moment with a shrug as it was the truth, kids seem to get more and more messed up with each new generation. Hearing all this, Millie nods. Exactly. Humans have a lot of secret nasties. It's the reason why so many of them end up down here in hell. She explains, pointing out the essential basis of hell's overpopulation issue. How exactly would you know for sure? Asks Naruto, questioning the point Luna and Millie are trying to make. Is it that hard to believe that there are humans out there with normal secrets, not horrible ones? He adds, as not every human would have disturbing secrets. Luna scoffs. Right, and I bet you didn't peep on your neighbors when they were changing when you were alive. She remarks with a roll of her eyes and a grin on her face. Naruto practically gagged. Kami, no. Why would you think that? I'm not Blitz. He protests in disgust at the thought of peeking at someone in such a way. Why? Moxie asks with a raise of his brow. The only window I had at my apartment topside only gave me an unpleasant view of an ugly naked guy. Exhibitionist much? Luna remarks with a smirk on her face. Hearing this, the one sinner practically went on a rant. I get it. You're naked in the privacy of your own home. But come on. Close the damn blinds when you do it. He raged as the last thing he wanted to see every morning was his overweight neighbor doing freaking naked yoga. Didn't you have curtains or something? Moxie asks, as it seemed like the whole issue could have been avoided if Naruto had set objects to block the window. I did, but how could I get any other natural light in my place and not look outside on occasion? Naruto says with a sigh, as his apartment when he was alive really sucked. Then how about in your younger years? Millie asks in curiosity. Lived in an orphanage and my room didn't have windows if I recall it correctly. Was the Vulpine Sinner's response, accompanied by a nonchalant shrug. Then you peeped on some girls when there? Luna questions with a slight grin as she pictured Naruto sneaking a peek at girls as they were changing or bathing. A small part of her actually fantasized about him doing that to her and what scenarios could come about as a result. They were primarily 10 or so years younger than me. They were, however, like a handful closer to my age. Naruto says with a deadpan look, as the majority of the fellow orphans at the orphanage were all under 10 years old when he was there. However, there were a few that were teens and only a year or two younger than him prior to his leaving the orphanage when he became a legal adult. And? Luna asks expectantly with an almost eager look on her face. Opening his mouth, Naruto's words fell short when he tried to think of an excuse. Now that he pondered about it, those girls closer to his age were cute. The tempting thought of peeking on them had popped up every so often, but never followed through, as he didn't want to get in trouble with the people running the orphanage. Though thinking on it further, as it might be in his imagination, the aforementioned girls peeped on him. Okay, we get it. Naruto's a complicated exception or something. Millie conceded. Satan knows what caused him to wind up here. She adds, as from what she had seen from and heard from him, there isn't anything she can think of that should have resulted in him winding up in hell. Why is that so hard to understand? Naruto continues asking. So I'm not someone with all these dark secrets. I doubt that's enough of a way to have me sent down here. You've been here for like what, a year? Hello. You're in a place where it's obvious every other human on Earth has a dark side or whatever, guaranteeing them a one-way ticket here and deserving it. If you don't like random people dying, then just be okay with the type that has it coming. Luna remarks with a shake of her head. I get that. But don't always assume everyone's thrown into hell for obvious reasons. Argued Naruto. All I figure is heaven has odd, stupid standards. He adds, as he honestly couldn't think of anything that he had done in his life prior to his death that would warrant him not getting into heaven. Things were getting oddly sidetracked now, having the imp from Wrath speak up. Point is, Moxie, is that guilty and innocent people aren't our business. Killing who we're paid to, however, is. Millie cups his cheek and gives it a peck to help encourage him. Now, choose a target. She adds with a blank look on her face. Digesting and understanding their points of view, Moxie was still hesitant on what to do. This was seen with him lifting up the crossbow to take aim, only to set it down on his shoulder as he was nervously shaking again. I just think this is a bit excessive and we could be a bit more selective, is all. With a loud bang, the door to Blitzo's office slams open as the tall imp and Madeline come out. Guys. I'd like you to meet. His abrupt entrance startled Moxie into pulling the crossbow's trigger on accident, causing the arrow to ricochet around the room, and they all followed its trail. It first collided with the computer monitor near Millie, causing her to jump into her husband's arms. Then it shot through the photo Luna was holding, stunning her. It bounced off the wall and flew between Naruto's legs, yet almost grazed his lower anatomy and made him yelp in the process. The arrow then hits the table holding up a water tank filled with eels, and the tank starts to wobble dangerously. Soon enough, the arrow almost hits Madeline, but Naruto dashed in and caught it before Blitzo got the chance. Our newest client. He turns to his Sinner employee. Nice catch there, Balto. It's Naruto. The blonde fox corrected his boss before turning to Mayberry. You alright? He adds, asking his fellow Sinner if she was okay. Madeline gives a flustered nod, given he saved her once again and of how close he was in this instance. She ended up mumbling a little in the process that was a little hard to make out. It was at that moment the tank finally fell down, spilling the electric eels. They squirmed and splashed on the carpet, all the while charged up and blasted out their electrical currents, setting the entire room ablaze. While everyone else freaked out, Blitzo was more annoyed. "Damn it, Moxie. I just bought those eels," he bellows, throwing the arrow right into the receptionist's desk. "Excuse me," Moxie yells out in shock and disbelief at how his boss was more upset about the aquarium being knocked over instead of how the office was currently on fire. "I'm calling the fire department." Naruto whips out his phone before barking out. "Everyone out, now," he says hastily. The Vulpine Sinner didn't wait as he quickly grabbed Madeline in a bridal carry and quickly rushed out of the office, not before snagging Luna, who yelped in the process as he threw her onto his back. The imps followed close behind as the fire quickly spread. About a half hour had passed since the fire as the imp firefighters had arrived onto the scene and took care of the burning office. And presently, some of them were carrying the eels away. Whether that was due to them being evidence or just wanting them for themselves was anyone's guess. As this went on, Madeline waited for a taxi to arrive as Blitzo spoke with her. "Don't worry, ma'am. We'll get that skank in less than 24 hours or your first kill is free." The teacher Sinner looked at the tall imp just as the taxi arrived and climbed in. "I'll hold you to that." What happened in the office made her lose some confidence in them, but there was no one else around running a business and settling scores for sinners like her. The only saving grace was her roommate being an employee. She then looked past Blitzo and gazed at Naruto. "Good luck," she said finally before telling the driver her address as they took off. "Since when did we start implementing that deal?" Moxie asked from the side, given this being the first time he's hearing this. Blitzo grabs his employee's face with a kind smile and doe-like eyes. "Why, when you set fire to my office in front of our client, you fucking dipshit," he shouts angrily, pushing him away. "Now someone better please say that fancy book is still intact." Naruto pondered slightly after hearing Blitzo's slight change of deals. "Wonder if I could delay the kill so I can get my money back." He shook his head on the thought. "It won't do any good." Luna, who was leaning against the wall of the building, mildly checked her phone as she gave a rhetorical response. "You mean our only ticket to the other side?" She whips out the grimoire from behind her. "Yeah, I got it. And that's why you're my favorite loony. You get a treat now," said Blitzo in a babyish tone as he held up a doggy treat to her. This being his own form of praise a proud father would give. Looking at it, Luna looked away in disgust as it was all but shoved close to her face. "You. Stop." Blitzo shrugged his shoulders as he tosses the treat into the air and oddly caught it with his tongue, like a frog, all before eating it, which made Luna cringe in disgust. "You're so gross." "Oh, stop it." Blitzo bashfully waves. "I get enough of that with my therapist." "You see a therapist?" Naruto asked rather curiously. "I do." Blitzo states, sounding rather proud of the fact that he sees a therapist. "How often and how well are they?" "'Cause I think you're not making any progress at all," Luna remarks with a dry look on her face. The eyes of the taller imp twitched as Luna hackled on the burn. As this went on, Millie drew a pentagram circle as Luna read through Stola's book to cast the spell, creating a portal to the human world soon after. The Hellhound was going to head back into the burnt office and see what can be salvaged with Naruto when. "Hey, can I come with you guys?" The Vulpine Sinner asks suddenly and inadvertently disrupts any potential plans Luna had for spending time with him alone. Blitzo turns and looks at his Sinner employee alongside the others. "Excuse me? I mean, you hired me as a bodyguard. So I thought, maybe, now's as good a time as any to finally start." Naruto replies with a shrug of his shoulders as it was true. He was hired on as a bodyguard yet hadn't actually done any said guarding so far. The taller imp thought it over slightly. "Sure, why not? You're trained enough and better to get field experience sooner than later." Blitzo says with an uncaring shrug, especially because it meant that if the Sinner was with him, it meant that he wouldn't be alone with Luna. "You sure that's fine to do, sir?" Moxie interjects. "I'll actually listen more to your suggestions when you stop being an office-burning asshole." Blitzo insults him while pushing him out of the way from the portal. "Now let's go lick some ass." The expression is kick some ass. Millie corrects her boss, having stepped through the portal first. "Mine's better." Blitzo counters before he follows after. Moxie sighs and grumbles. "He never listens to me." "It's his nature, Moxie," Naruto says as the two of them follow through the portal next before it closes up behind them. Still there, Luna's mood was slightly soured on seeing Naruto finally leave on a job. It'll be quiet in the office now and she'll be more bored than ever without him entertaining her. Living world. It was the twilight hours of the day when the members of I.M.P saw they were at a lakeside house, secluded in the wilderness. It was a really beautiful sight, being quite the stark contrast of what they see in hell. "Wow, it feels so weird," Naruto comments aloud. "What is?" Millie asks with a questioning look on her face. Being back here. The Vulpine adds as he looks around at the forest the group finds themselves in and soaking in everything he can of the scenery. It took a moment for Millie to realize something. Oh right. Forgot for a moment you're a sinner. She says, having actually forgotten Naruto was a sinner for a moment, as it honestly wasn't obvious given his Vulpine appearance. Yeah. Moxie shifted his eyes a little. Hopefully we don't get in trouble with you being with us here. Hey, minus the eyes, he looks like a hellhound. Blitzo interjects. We'll just be done with the job lickety-split before we know it. For the added thought, Naruto figured he didn't need to use his human disguise spell to complete this mission at all, given how easy this can be. Not to mention the secluded location they were presently at. The crew crept their way to the 3-story cabin and took place in several spots in case of anything. For Blitzo and Moxie, they went through some flower bushes and got up to a windowsill, while Millie and Naruto were some feet away in the foliage. Looking through the window, Blitzo saw the small family of 4 getting ready to have dinner at the family table. And the target Martha was standing beside her husband. She looked well after getting out of the hospital as she still had medical wrap around her head. Aside from that, she dressed normally with a red polka dot white blouse to show some of her cleavage and her Dixie jeans to help show off her figure. Oh yeah, that's gotta be her. Blitzo chuckles out. This is too easy. He looks over to his one employee and smiles. How about it, Mox? You wanna take this one? Me? Moxie asks out of surprise. Yeah, this one's simple enough for you to handle. Blitzo scoots over a little for Moxie to stand up and get a better view from the window. At that moment, Moxie's pleasant face falls as he looks at the target about to have dinner with her family. It's just a happy mother who just got out of the hospital. Martha and her husband Ralphie affectionately rub each other's noses as their son and daughter wait for them to dig in. There was another placement on the table with a wheelchair with some urn placed on the seat, indicating a deceased and cremated family member. For the briefest of moments, the imp's mind momentarily flashed to a simpler time in his life when he hardly thought of much troubles in his home. All because of one caring person who sheltered him from a harsh reality until they were gone forever. Seeing all this, Moxie begins to hesitate. But I. From nearby, Naruto crawled up to the spot and speaks up. Moxie, if you don't want to do it, I could. Volunteered the sinner. While he wasn't entirely thrilled with the idea of killing Martha, it would at least bring some satisfaction for Mayberry on him doing the deed himself. There was also the fact that his time in hell had somewhat desensitized him to a degree when it came to killing. While he wasn't open to wanton slaughter, Naruto had accepted that sometimes you just needed to kill someone or they needed to die. In his mind, Martha was one such person. The woman had knowingly and willingly slept with Madeline's husband despite knowing he was married and thus set off the whole chain of events that lead to Madeline's life ending and her ending up in hell. Then to add on the fact that Martha was rewarded for her actions, no way in hell. Seeing his employee hesitate, Blitzo pulls out his sniper rifle. You snooze, you lose, Mox. He trained his sights, his scope zooming into Martha's benevolent face. I've got ya, bitch. Wait, are we actually killing a family? Moxie blurts out of concern. What? Naruto hissed. That's not the plan, Blitzo. He says with a low growl as he was fine with Martha being killed, not her family. It's Blitz. Corrected the taller imp. And don't be a puss, you too. We're just killing a mother. Blitzo repositions his rifle once more. We're ruining a family. He states with a wicked grin. Naruto quickly thought it over. Okay, that makes sense. The sinner figured Moxie didn't want to leave the husband a widower and the kids without a mother. Yet Martha fucked Madeline over badly in more ways than one. Moxie, however, was more concerned about the situation. But hold on. Let's just think about it. He says, pushing the rifle just as Blitzo fired, hitting a glass mirror inside the dining room and alerting the small family. Quickly kneeling below the windowsill, the taller imp began berating his employee. What the fuck was that, Moxie? Yelled Blitzo while Moxie was breathing heavily in the middle of a panic attack. Guys. Says Naruto, peeking inside and noticing very off about the target and her family. He saw the hunting memorabilia, which wasn't what really concerned him. It was some of the decorations and house appliances like a lamp with a person's spine serving as the pole, a child's actual head mounted on a wall. I'm sorry. They just seemed so wholesome and happy. Moxie wept out. Eyes. Naruto says once more, only for the two imps to ignore him. Look, I panicked, and Moxie begins to say only to be interrupted. Oh, who the fuck cares if they're innocent, Moxie? Blitzo begins poking Moxie's head. From the moment of your birth, you're already a parasite leeching off your mama's tits. At this point, Naruto's eyes widened when he saw Martha, Ralphie and their children whip out fucking shotguns from underneath the table. Guys. He yells out loudly to get their attention. What? Blitzo shouts back in annoyance. Move. was the sinner's shout back in urgency before the sound of a gunshot rang out. A big hole was blasted wide open from underneath the windowsill. Some debris or some buckshot grazed Blitzo's arm, having black blood seeping out. As for Naruto, he was grazed on his side, making him hiss in pain as he tackled the two imps out of the way. Ah! A new hole. Blitzo shouts in alarm. Scatter. He yells out before he takes off into the forest. Millie went more towards the lake, and Moxie was huddled in the foliage. He looked over and saw Martha and Ralphie leap out of the hole with savage grins to chase after the fleeing imps. Moments later, Naruto popped out of the foliage and saw Ralphie going after Millie, prompting him to run after him instead of Martha, who went after Blitzo. Shortly afterwards, Moxie came out and looked about to see where he would go, all before he was yanked by the tail and was pulled inside of the house. Ralphie fired off a few shots at Millie, who leapt and dashed away from the shots by the docks. Just when she dived into the water, Ralphie was keeping an eye out for his prey. "Where are you, little critter?" says Ralphie with a sadistic grin on his face as he reloads his shotgun. Soon he was tackled to the ground by Naruto, who was now punching the man in the face several times. Before long, the sinner was kneed hard in the groin, causing him to roll over in pain. Well, aren't you a big one?" chuckled Ralphie as he gave a savage smile, revealing his gold tooth amongst his bloody pearly whites. "You'll make a fine rug by the fireplace." "I'd like to see you try." Naruto wheezed out slightly. "You think you can stop me, fox boy?" Ralphie taunts him with a gleeful smirk on his face. "Maybe." A vulpine grin soon appears on the sinner's face. But not alone. His arms quickly move and snags the shotgun. Ralphie fights to pry it away, but Naruto was a bit too strong. With a harsh yank, Naruto kicks Martha's husband back soon after. "Millie." He's wide open. He calls out. But that said, Millie leaps out of the water with her hunting knife, slashing the back of Ralphie's legs, causing him to stumble and balance. Right after, instead of using the shotgun in the traditional way, Naruto used it as a club to smack Ralphie's head a few times over. The man tumbles to the ground with a groan, and before he could attempt getting back up, Millie dives in and plunges her knife into the man's back several times, with one last thrust through the back of his neck. The imp's blade pops out from the opening of Ralphie's mouth, causing him to gurgle out his own blood before expiring. Looking over the corpse, Millie and Naruto take some deep breaths to collect themselves. Glancing over, the imp saw Naruto bleeding, in which the sinner noticed. "I'm fine. I've had worse." "Like what?" Millie asks with a raised eyebrow. "Done a lot of bodyguard work for the past year to get similar injuries." Naruto says, vaguely leaving out just who he had been bodyguarding. However, before Millie could ask who he had been working for, the two coworkers whirled around, hearing the gunshots in the distance. "I'm gonna go after Blitz, you find your husband," says Naruto, all but rushing into the forest before Millie could interject. Meanwhile, inside of the house. Moxie groggily regains consciousness. Gasping, the white-haired imp found himself restrained to a chair at a table. He saw the target's children stare at him with red eyes and devious sharp grins form on their faces, unnerving him. "Oh. Well, hello, little ones. Aren't you cute?" he nervously said, trying to appease them. However, both kids turned up the already high enough creepy factor by speaking in unison. "We love it when we have a new critter to play with." Confused, Moxie took a look at his surroundings illuminated by a red light to show him what their definition of playing meant. Every corner of the room was decorated with human remains such as flayed and or mounted people, stretched and framed skin, corpse furniture, and to finish it off, the dried tied-up body serving as a centerpiece of the one table, with several chunks ripped and bitten off for some time now. This was all genuine proof that Blitzo was right about these humans. They were remorseless cannibalistic killers hiding in secret, increasing Moxie's intense fear. This family was nowhere near the supposedly innocent levels Moxie assumed they were at first glance. Not even their client Madeline Mayberry could have known, or she would have added that when she hired them. These people were demons in their own right, a mess of a family that put up the masquerade of a nice normal wholesome family, as Moxie could clearly realize with his own two eyes of dread and horrified expression. It was then that a sobering and terrifying realization sunk into him. Because of his hesitation, he and his coworkers, that included his wife, were all at risk of suffering at their hands. Now fully aware of the mess his own weakness got them all in, the now guilt-rotten imp had this to say. "Oh crumbs." Soon this guilt paved way to determination as Moxie began struggling to break free from the tight rope that restrained him to the corpse chair. However, it was done real tight and it would take a lot of strength to undo it, he just needed to summon enough. Thoughts of his beloved wife plagued his mind, making him more determined to free himself, and when he saw the little girl pull out a knife, he glared in defiance. As the little girl was ready to kill her prey, she was knocked down when Moxie pushed the chair back, allowing the white-haired imp to take the knife and begin cutting the rope. However, he momentarily forgot the little boy was in the same room and came over with his gun drawn out. Just as the cannibalistic boy was about to fire the trigger, a black blur collided against the child as some roughhousing ensued. From the light coming from the window, Moxie saw it was his wife Millie. He cried out, soon cutting himself out from his bonds. He soon rushed over and assisted his wife in taking care of the gun-wielding boy. Some shots rang out in the playroom, with one breaking the room's window in the process. With a quick slash from Millie's knife to his throat, the boy collapses to the ground and bleeds out to death. Over the boy's body, Moxie was panting a little and glances over to his wife, who was a little worse for wear. He smiles, which Millie returns in kind. They were about to embrace when he heard some faint movements from behind. Acting quickly, Moxie snatches the gun on the ground and fires. A split second later, the little girl collapses to the ground as she was bleeding from the gunshot wound to the chest. "Damn, sweetie. Didn't know you had that in ya." Millie compliments with a bit of a sexy purr and grin as seeing her husband so ruthlessly dispatch the psycho kid had gotten her a little wound up. Hearing this, Moxie gives Millie a tired smile. "Well, I didn't want to be dinner for these kids," he says with a slight chuckle. "Be dinner?" Millie asks, only for her eyes to look about and cringe. "Oh," she says in realization as she gazes upon the decor of the room. These people were indeed monsters, ones that her husband and Naruto actually thought to defend. Somehow, that made things feel worse. Moxie picks up one of the family's rifles from nearby. "Let's go save our team," he tells his wife, finally taking this job the way an assassin should, jumping out of the window alongside Millie as they both raced into the forest. Earlier as this all went down, Blitzo is constantly running for cover from the crazy hillbilly bitch. Said woman was firing her weapon into the forest as she was all but playing with her prey. It didn't help when Martha was sinisterly laughing, which echoed throughout the vicinity. Sliding down a hill, Blitzo looked about as he had to catch his breath at the bottom. "I know you're hurtin', little devil," Martha called out in glee, suppressing a moan as the thrill of ruthlessly hunting down her prey was starting to arouse her. The tall imp takes off for a moment before ducking behind a tree and covering his mouth so he wouldn't make a sound. He could fight back, but his arm was injured with black blood seeping through and he had no gun on him to retaliate. "I promise I can make that pain go real quick," Martha's depraved voice rang out. In the corner of his eye, Blitzo can make out her silhouette walking through the woods in search of him. "Just come, let Mama Martha put a bullet in your pretty little skull." Blitzo merely presses himself against a tree and collects his thoughts on this shit show he was in. "Fuck this hillbilly bitch," Blitzo thought with a tinge of fear welling in his chest. "I thought this was some chronic two-timing lying whore like what the client stated. But Nuoshi and her family are packing heat and crazier than those freaks in the cannibal district." He fought a great urge to growl or else he'd be quickly spotted. "I'm seriously gonna charge the client double for this." "Couldn't help but notice that fine beast you had with you," Martha cackles jovially. "He'll make a wonderful feast once we're done with you and your hellish ilk," she says before outright purring, "though that will only be after I sample his goods, as it's been a while since I tasted doggy beep," the crazed woman adds, revealing her occasional dalliance into bestiality. Blitzo shakes his head with widened eyes, understanding clearly how bad this now is. Oh Christ on a stick, they're cannibals and this chick is also into bestiality. That tears it, I'm tripling this job. He thinks to himself as the job keeps getting worse and worse. Hearing Martha's movements growing fainter as she went deeper into the forest, Blitzo released a built-up breath in his chest and sighs in relief. Only to freeze as he heard his hellphone go off with an all-too-familiar ringtone going off. He quickly pulls out the device, clumsily throwing it in the air before catching it. "Why do I not put this on silent?" he thought with several following curses before answering the call. "Stolas. This is a really bad time to call," he said through angered whispers. "Oh, but when isn't it a bad time, Blitzy?" Stolas playfully complained like a spoiled child. How he enjoys playing this little game with the imp that stole his heart. "What do you want now?" Blitzo asked in a hushed tone so as to not alert the psycho hillbilly bitch to his location. "I've been meaning to follow up on our last little conversation regarding my grimoire," the Gosha playfully says over the phone as he lunges in his bathtub in his mansion. With all the blood seeping out of his wound and pumping through his heart, Blitzo's mind was all over the place, making him not know what Stolas was referring to, but assumed something sexual. "What did you call me?" Chuckling in amusement, Stolas clarifies over the phone. "My book, Blitzy. The one I was given to do my job that I have allowed you to do yours. The very same book that most of Hell's elite wouldn't lend to just anyone, let alone of the demons ranked lower than them. Stolas' grimoire was given to him by his father payment for him to learn for his duties of hell before passing on his knowledge to his beloved daughter and heir, Octavia." Being on the phone while a deranged cannibal woman was hunting him down on Earth was a very stupid thing for someone to do. But when it was Stolas, Blitzo had no choice but to listen to whatever he had to tell him. Hearing a rifle clicking, Blitzo quickly moves out of the way just as a bullet pierces through the tree that the tall imp was at moments before. "I can hear you in the forest, darling," Martha declares, reloading to shoot again. "Shit." Blitzo curses as he runs again, still on the phone. "Anyway, I've been thinking. I don't mind permitting you access to the mortal realm less than legally for some time now, but I do the book back to fulfill my duties. I was thinking, what if we worked out some kind of exchange? Favors for favors." Blitzo listens to his suggestion, still running from more gunfire. "Doesn't that sound enticing?" The owl demon in a low, seductive voice, eagerly waiting to hear what Blitzo had to say and clearly hoping he'd hear him out. As gunshots once more rang out, Blitzo continued to dodge bullet after bullet from Martha's shotgun as he was running for his life. "You gotta stop using your fancy-ass rich people talk and speed this up, okay?" Blitzo demands, seeing that it was dragging on the phone call. "I'm trying to concentrate on not getting fucked in my A." A bullet blasted a hole in the tree he was hiding behind, making him momentarily freeze. Stolas obliged him. "Then let me keep it simple. Once a month, on the full moon, you return my grimoire, followed by a night of passionate fornication." Blitzo couldn't believe Stolas called just for that. "And you keep it the rest of the time, Sound fair to you, my little imp?" The Gosha says, laying out an arrangement for the two to follow. Blitzo had to admit it was a fair deal. Stolas could have done worse by demanding his own cut of the profit his team makes, like most high-class demons would've, and he couldn't risk losing the key object that makes their business even possible in the first place, and Stolas won't stop the call until he got an answer. After all, Blitzo and his group didn't have any other method like those expensive as hell Asmodean crystals to allow their owners better access to the human realm. Plus, there was also the added factor Blitzo had to presently deal with Martha still gunning for him. "Fine, whatever." Stolas was happy to hear this. "Oh, Blitzy. I'm so glad. You've made me the happiest Gosha. I cannot wait to feel your slimy CCK inside of my dot to the." Blitzo cringed in disgust, thankful that there seemed to be an almost ironic timed sequence of bad cell reception that seemingly censored the depraved things Stolas was saying. The imp then made a mental note to purchase some noise-cancelling apps or maybe screen his phone calls. Having his phone on speaker was a huge mistake considering he was being hunted down by a crazy gun-wielding woman. His eyes wandered about and took notice of something. There were a plethora of strange red symbols. Not just painted on the trees, but also sculpted out and hung from several branches. It didn't take long for Blitzo to realize what he and his crew got themselves into. "Oh great, they're fucking Satanists as well, wonderful." Blitzo growled in thought. "I'm quadrupling this job now. These types of people are really annoying down in pride. Upon dying and coming down into hell, they get all preachy of some glory of being in the pit. After a while, they harass just about everyone in a whole number of ways. However, when they're alive, they're considered some of the most dangerous groups of people around with their methods to worship the princes and other royals of hell. And depending on how dangerous they really were when alive, they could be more powerful as a sinner to perhaps be around overlord levels." So having the factor that Martha and her family were satanic cannibals with Martha also dabbling in bestiality apparently, this really made the job all the more dangerous to work through. Distracted by both his thoughts and his conversation with Stolas, Blitzo's phone was knocked out of his hands by Martha's gun and was pinned to the tree by the butt of it. As Blitzo feared, Martha followed the sound of him making the call. "Gotcha." Martha looked Blitzo over. "So, you're a little devil, huh? Come to drag me and my kin to hell. Well, not today, Satan. Gonna send y'all back where you came from." She presses the gun harder with a heated glare with a sadistic toothy smile. "Actually lady, you just spared me a very awkward conversation." Blitzo comments when Martha begins hearing a series of beeps of censored words confusing her as she looks at the discarded hellphone before glancing back to him. "It gets weirder than that. At least you don't get fucked in the ass for business. You'd be surprised." Comments Martha as she momentarily releases her hold on Blitzo with her gun, only to quickly thrust it forward to knock the tall imp out. However, this action was thwarted when she was tackled from the side. Said tackling was from none other than Naruto. "Hell yeah, Minato. Kick her ass." Blitzo begins to yell out with a wide grin on his face at seeing his employee tackle the crazy bitch. "It's Naruto, you asshole," was the enraged shout from the Vulpine as he wrestled with Martha trying to pry her gun from her grip. "Bitch is stronger than she looks." Naruto growls out before wincing as he received a hit to the groin for the second time today. "Seriously again?" The sinner wheezes out, clutching his groin and seriously considering getting a cup when this job is over. "Ah, don't worry little demon, Mama Martha is going to nurse you up real good, take you for a ride, send you back to hell, then ride you again." Martha cackled evilly with a manic grin on her face while aiming her weapon. "Oh great, necrophilia too. Seriously lady, pick a fucking lane instead of checking off all the crazy bitch boxes." Blitzo calls out from the sidelines, nursing his arm and throat. Martha laughs also evilly and is ready to kill the sinner with her shotgun when a gunshot was heard and a body falls over. More specifically Martha's, as there was now a hole in her head where her right eye should be. Her body bleeds out from the wound and it was all thanks to Moxie holding a gun behind her. "Moxie," Naruto says happily. "Man, I'm glad to see you." The sinner adds as he gets to his feet on slightly shaky knees due to still getting pulses of pain from his groin. Soon after, Millie arrives on the scene before rushing over and glumps her husband and kisses him. From nearby, Blitzo trudges over while still holding his arm. "You're not getting your goddamn paycheck for this one, Mox." He then looks to the Vulpine Sinner. "And neither will you, Naraku." "Blitz." Millie yells angrily at her boss. "What? He's supposed to save our sorry asses. I have a new hole in my body." Blitzo yells out, countering his employee's outburst. "Sir, need I remind you that he did try to warn us and tackled us out of the way." Moxie defends his one coworker. "Besides, you just got a scratch." He adds with a deadpan look on his face as the gunshot wound to Blitzo's arm really wasn't that serious. "And I just came in and saved your sorry ass." Naruto adds in. Blitzo groans in annoyance, knowing that to be true. "Okay, fine. He's only getting half his cut." Naruto rolls his eyes, not wanting to say he's getting back some of his money he's essentially paying on this job. "What was that bit you were saying about Martha? Something like picking a lane?" "Yeah, turns out she's not only a cannibal, but a Satanist that apparently dabbled in bestiality as well." Blitzo remarks with a flippant wave of his uninjured arm's hand. "Spread that out to the rest of her family." Moxie comments. "Well, fuck a whole family of satanic cannibal bestiality necrophiles." Blitzo remarks with a raised eyebrow, as you don't see that every day. No sir, I think she might have been the only one into the last two." Moxie remarks sheepishly as he really didn't want the mental image that would accompany his boss's remark. Naruto cringes when hearing this. "Damn, that's gonna be a mess to deal with." He says as there was no way such a family wouldn't end up in hell, meaning it's entirely possible they could run into them again. Pulling out a burner phone from his pocket, Naruto called the local authorities to place an anonymous tip about Martha and her family. Sure, they're dead, but at least their reputations will be dragged through the muck with their taboo secrets revealed in the near future. As Naruto was making the call. "I'm sorry sir. I compromised our objective and put us in harm's way," says Moxie, looking sorry. "It won't happen again. I promise." Blitzo looked at him and gave a small smile as he pulled him into a hug. "Apology accepted," he says in a caring tone until he lowly whispers into Moxie's ear. "But if you ever pull a stunt like this again, I will fuck you and your wife." He then pushes Moxie away, who fell to the dirt. "Alrighty. Job well done. Now let's get off." Naruto helped his coworker back up and saw the unsettled and terrified look Moxie bore. "Do I even wanna know?" he asks with a skeptical look on his face, figuring Blitzo must have said something pretty horrifying to the imp for his group. "Trust me, you don't," Moxie remarks with a gulp. Off to the side, Blitzo calls Luna to get a portal opened up to return them home. As this happened, the Vulpine Sinner looked up with a longing expression. "What you looking at, Naruto?" asks Millie. "The night sky," was the Sinner's response as he gazed at it. There were so many stars out tonight. Far more clearer than what he sees back in Pride. After all, the aforementioned ring has a red-tinted version of the living world sky in some odd knockoff. Pulling out his hellphone, Naruto took a variety of pictures and saved them to send to Octavia later. Pride sky is an iffy copy of the human realm sky, given the red tint on the daylight and nighttime hours. But nothing seems to beat how it's like in the mortal worlds for all its splendor. And add to the factor Octavia reignited Naruto into an old passion of stargazing. He enjoyed it immensely as a child, but had less and less time when growing older because he was more focused on work. "You doing okay, sweetie?" Millie asked sweetly to her husband, placing a comforting hand on his cheek. "Better now, honey. I think I just needed to think for a minute." Moxie responds while Millie touches his chest. "You have a good heart, honey. Just a fuzzy head," she says as the portal to hell appeared before she and Blitzo got in. Being the second last to leave, the small imp spoke to the Sinner. "Thanks for helping Millie." "Anytime, Moxie. She's grown on me as a good friend, just like you," Naruto says with a smile that lessens after a moment. "How do you deal with it?" he asks the imp. "Deal with what?" Moxie asks in confusion as to what the Vulpine was referring to. "Just killing all these people," Naruto remarks. "By being who you are and accepting it," Moxie says, being reassuring to his Sinner coworker. "You're clearly not like those people or anyone else like him. Same as me." "How so?" the Sinner asks in confusion as he didn't understand what his coworker meant. "The first 5-10 times you take a life, it's eerie. You remember every detail." I can still see or at least imagine all their faces contort as the light leaves their eyes. Moxie says with a slightly haunted tone as he recalls the first several people he killed. The first one being the most horrific given how young he was and what he learned after it was done. What kind of people did you kill at first? Naruto asks in curiosity. People I was ordered to, whether I liked it or not. Eventually I grew numb to it and moved on. Moxie says, leaving out specific details. And you're still doing that now cuz the Vulpine Sinner asks, trailing off as he was kinda getting the vibe that despite being okay with killing Moxie, didn't seem to like doing it in his opinion. At least I have a boss that's not as shitty as my previous employer. Moxie remarks with a slight scowl at the end of his statement. Seeing his coworker's expression, Naruto nods and decides to not pry any further into the imp's past. Whatever the case, Moxie, at least you have Millie keep you grounded and happy. That I do. Something I am heavily thankful for every day. Says the imp as the pair enter the portal before it closes behind them. Imp HQ. In the kitchen, the team was celebrating both Naruto's first job involving the cannibalistic satanic family and a completed job. Hanging by the wall was a banner reading "Killed the bitch" in red letters. For another addition to the little party was Madeline, who attended to celebrate a little about Martha's demise. Was the cake necessary? Naruto asks with a deadpan look as it seemed a bit much. Well, consider it a successful first day out on the field, Mamoru. Says Blitzo, whose arm was presently in a sling. Give it a few days and his limb will be right as rain. It's Naruto. Said the one sinner, who presently had his side stitched up and bandaged from the fight earlier. Blitzo ignored the correction as he raised his cup to the air. A little toast to another job well done. Moxie learning to not fuck up and Naraku proving his mettle. And killing people ain't that big a deal if they try to kill you backhand or eat you. Millie includes a wide happy grin on her face. Madeline and Naruto shudder a little in disturbance at that piece of morale. That's messed up. She mutters. True, but I paid for it. Naruto includes in a whisper, having her nod in turn. The imps didn't hear this, but Luna did as her ears twitched a little. The little party goes on, Millie jovially hugging Moxie at one table while off to the side Naruto was conversing with Blitzo. Madeline was having her cake and eating it too. Now while she didn't kill the bitch who ruined her life herself, Madeline still got some satisfaction out of it. As the female sinner was eating more of her piece of cake she noticed Luna walk over to her. Naruto paid for the job. The hellhound remarks with a raised eyebrow wondering why he would do that. Madeline shifts in her seat. I don't have a penny to my name down here. He did this out of the kindness out of his heart. I somewhat wonder why he'd even do this for me after what she says before trailing off and leaving the rest of the remark unsaid. It took some moments for Luna to piece things together, having her eyes narrow slightly and her jaw tightening. You got him killed. She nearly growls out as it was the only reason she could think of to justify Madeline's trailing off. He saved my life. Several times now, in fact. I don't know if I'll ever repay him after what I indirectly did. But he still forgave me. Madeline says with a small smile as she honestly felt as though she could never repay him enough for everything he has done for her. So what, he's gonna lord all this over you for the rest of your days. Luna remarks with a skeptical look on her face as it didn't seem like something Naruto would do. I don't know. Being with him these past days doesn't show, Madeline remarks before she is cut off. With him? Luna says, interrupting the female, slightly narrowing her eyes. I've also been living with him since I died. Madeline admits. It's only until I can get off my feet with a job and find another place to live. She says, revealing how he was living with Naruto. The hellhound hums a little, digesting this bit of detail. Has he done? You know, Luna says, trailing off as she makes a circle with her index finger and thumb before using the index finger on her other hand to repeatedly penetrate the circle. Fucked me? He hasn't. Madeline gives the imp secretary a look. Were you thinking he would? She asks, wondering what was going through the mind of the hellhound. It crossed my mind. Luna admits with a shrug as even she had to admit that Madeline was pretty sexy for a former school teacher. As this conversation between a sinner and hellhound took place, one with an imp and his employee occurred. Hey Neru. Blitzo says with a slight slur, indicating that he had been drinking during the party. Exhaling a sigh on the wrong and butchered name, Naruto responds. What, Blitz? The tall imp tosses a package to his sinner employee who caught it effortlessly. Taking a quick glance at it, it was of simple black wrapping with constellation designs. From who? The sinner asks with a raised eyebrow. Stolas. He got a look from the fox employee. Well, more specifically his daughter. The imp says with an uncaring shrug. Octavia. When? Naruto asks, raising an eyebrow in confusion as he hadn't seen either Gosha arrive at the party. If you expected either of them to show up, they didn't. Portal opened up in my office and that dropped on my desk earlier. Blitzo slurs out, swearing a bit as a result of his inebriated state. Oh. The sinner checked out the Pakage before glancing back to his boss. Would have thought you'd jump at the chance of ripping it open. Naruto remarks with a smirk at the jab to his boss's tendency to invade privacy. Tempted, but given who this came from I don't want to piss off the owl in ruining whatever surprise he has. Blitzo says with a shake of his head. Not to mention how he really didn't need to see some kind of depraved sex thing stole his daughter was potentially sending the sinner. If the girl was anything like her father it would be quite horrifying. Why, Naruto asked skeptically as it seemed like something Blitzo would most definitely do. Let's see. There's him supplying the book and there's the fact that I can imagine he can fuck my holes in an unpleasant way when Blitzo says listing off several reasons before being interrupted. Alright, I get it. Naruto hissed in disgust. He clearly didn't want to hear about his boss's sexual exploits with the Gosha prince. Oh yeah, Naruto. The tall imp got a quick look from his latest hire when he actually said his name correctly. You did good. Kept Mox and I relatively safe while helping Millie with the hellbilly hubby. Even do well around the office. Just keep doing a good job and we'll do fine. The sinner gave out a chuckle. Thanks Blitz. Left alone now and eyeing the wrapped Pakage, Naruto sent Octavia a text. Would you send me a gift? Moments later, he got a response. To congratulate you on your first mission under the red beephead. He snorts when texting back. You didn't have to. I know, but I did. So you like it? Was the response from the female Gosha. Haven't opened it yet. Wanted to wait until I'm in the comfort and privacy of my place. Naruto glanced back at Blitzo before sending another message. Especially away from my boss. Given what you told me, I think that's for the best. Octavia responds, and the sinner can practically picture the deadpan look on her face. Any hint for what you got me? The sinner replies with a slight grin on his face. Something I had to beg my dad to get commissionally made, was the owl demon's response, causing Naruto to raise an eyebrow. Beg much? Naruto texts back with a wry grin on his face. You asked for a hint and you're waiting. That's all I'll give until you open it. Was Octavia's response, and the Vulpine Sinner could practically picture the smirk on her face. Fair enough. Was the sinner's response, accompanied by a chuckle and shake of his head. Pocketing his phone, he eyed the Pakage a bit more. What would Octavia have her father commission for me? Getting a commission gift from a hellish noble would be very costly. It would be far more valuable depending on the item in question. The temptation was there as Naruto wanted to rip off the wrapping right away and see what it was in front of his co-workers and roommate. I can wait a bit longer until I get home. Naruto placed his gift aside for now as Luna walked up to him as she ate from her piece of cake. Congrats on the job. The hellhound remarks casually with her mouth still partially full of the piece of cake. Heard how well you did it from Millie and Blitz. Thanks Luna. Naruto replies with a small smile on his face. Once swallowing a piece of her cake, the hellhound decides to not beat around the bush and get to the point. So you're the one who essentially called the hit? She questions with a raised eyebrow. The sinner halts himself from taking a drink when he gives the response. Figured it out already, huh? He remarks with a chuckle as he figured it was likely only a matter of time before the hellhound found out he was the one that funded Madeline's hiring of I.M.P, given how observant she was. I have good hearing. That and I talked to her about it. Luna reveals casually as she takes a sip of her drink before blanching at the taste and spitting it out back into the cup in disgust. Leave it to Blitzo to get a nasty cheap beer. The hum emanates from his throat before taking a swig of his beer to properly wash down his cake. Madeline wanted it done far more than me. Naruto remarks casually with a shrug. You still paid for it. Luna remarks with a slight grin on her face. But I did. I just wanted to help out my friend. The Vulpine Sinner says as it was the truth. He didn't help Madeline for thanks or reward. No, he did it because it was something his friend needed help doing. Even though she got you killed. Luna remarks with a questioning look as it was pretty out there to help the one who is the reason behind such an event. I don't blame her. Naruto says with a shake of his head, causing Luna's eyes to widen slightly. She didn't ask to get attacked that night. I made the choice to intervene, knowing that it could end badly for me, yet I did it anyway, because it was the right thing to do, he adds. Seeing he wasn't going to drop the one matter, Luna decided to switch to a related topic. You know, Blitz is gonna be charging more given the circumstances. Thinking about the specific reveals of the latest job, Naruto accepts it. Wouldn't put it past him. No shit. Luna snorts out. Though you'd save more if you actually brought it up to him that you funded the job. She says though part of her thought it likely wouldn't have worked as Blitzo would have likely still charged him full price and think up some half-assed excuse to justify it. Why? Naruto asks in confusion. Employee discount. More specifically, one's done once a year. Luna states with a shrug as each employee was given a single assassination job discount for someone on Earth a year. Why this was a thing the Hellhound had no idea given how none of them had any enemies up on Earth. Wait, there's a once-a-year employee discount. Seeing Luna nod, Naruto grumbles. Great. I'll definitely need to bring that up. He says with a sigh as a discount on the job would be nice, given how the price will be going up due to all the shit that went down. You certainly will need to. Luna says sympathetically, having an idea of just how much Blitzo is going to jack up the price of the job. How bad? Naruto asks with a wince, almost fearing the answer. Let's just say a lot. Luna says vaguely before taking another bite of her slice of cake. I'll talk to Blitz later about it. The sinner glances over to his boss, who was chugging down some beer and shoving more cake into his mouth. Don't want to distract him right now. After a while the party started to wind down as it neared closing time for the office. Millie and Moxie said their goodbyes to their coworkers and Madeline before heading off to their home, while Naruto helped clean up a little with Madeline. Once done, they left the office with Blitzo and Luna shortly after. Alright. I'll be seeing you guys in the morning. Naruto waves at the imp and hellhound, who get in the Blitzo's van and leave while he walks alongside Madeline. What do you want to do now? The former teacher asks. She looks at her watch to see the current time. The night is still young. We could go straight back home. A Vulpine smirk graces his lips. Or we could go out to dinner to celebrate. My treat. He offers her, figuring she might want to celebrate a little more. Madeline smiled, hooking her arm around his. I'll be delighted. Leaving the parking lot, neither of them noticed the lingering looks of Luna in the side mirror of the van, as she frowned slightly. The hellhound thought back to what the client spoke of her coworker. Not to mention reflecting back to their time together since joining I.M.P. Think there's more to him than I initially thought. Luna ponders as her adoptive dad pulls the van out of the parking lot and drives down the road heading towards their home. Sometimes it's hard for one to come to terms that good souls wind up in hell, and Naruto was one of them. As the two sinners walked down the streets of I.M.P. City, Naruto was idly chatting with his roommate as he was leading her to a nice place to eat for dinner. Thank you again for doing the job for me. Madeline suddenly says to her roommate after a moment of silence in their conversation. No problem, Madeline. Was the Vulpine Sinner's response as he waves off the thanks from the female sinner. The two sinners turned a corner as they neared the restaurant Naruto was leading them to when a voice called out, suddenly making them stop. Well, looky here, just the furball we were looking for, and judging by the clothing of the bitch next to him, it's that bitch teacher who hired those little demons, the voice says in a southern accent. Hearing that all too familiar voice from the Cyclops sinner, Naruto growled. Martha. The one sinner was a pink-skinned Cyclops woman with a red X where her other eye should be and an impressive figure. A pair of twisted horns jutted out from her bushy white hair. Her clothes were torn as she looked like a roughed-up hillbilly woman. Beside her was a hillbilly-looking hulkish orc with sharp teeth, with one tooth being gold jutting out from his lip. In front of the adult sinners were a pair of children who were creepy gremlin-looking in appearances. Seeing the sinners, Naruto immediately got in front of Madeline in order to protect her from Martha and her family. Martha? Mayberry asks from behind Naruto before looking at the one sinner. A momentary instance of the woman's appearance was replaced with what she looked like when alive. You, the sinner roared in rage at the sight of the woman who ruined her marriage and life. Smoldering, huh? Martha sarcastically says. All the more delightful for payback. Now, well, we could go back and forth cursing and cussing each other out. How's about we just get down to the fun part where me and my kin rip that pretty little head of yours off and fuck yourself with it before we eat the fox, the hillbilly woman says with a crazed toothy grin that was mirrored by her family. Yak, no, after learning they were cannibals, I thought they'd be dumped at the cannibal district. Naruto growls. Appears I was wrong. He remarks with narrowed eyes at the threats in front of him. They didn't have weapons on them, but that didn't mean they weren't physically dangerous, especially in the case of Ralphie, as the Vulpine was willing to bet his muscles were for more than just show. Said thoughts were proven correct as in a burst of speed Ralphie dashed towards the two with a raised fist intent on caving in the Vulpine's face. Acting fast, Naruto brought up his wrapped-up gift and used it as a small shield from the blow. There was quite the crack from the Pakage that followed as the attack was thwarted. Following the cracking sound was a bit of clattering on the pavement, having Naruto glance down to see what came from the broken Pakage. Eyes widened when seeing what originated from it. No way, Naruto states in awe at what he was seeing before reaching down to pick up the objects. The fuck? Ralphie hissed loudly as he recoiled back from the shock of hitting the Pakage, while cradling his badly burned fist that was smoking and felt as if he had dunked it into a vat of acid. The newly arrived sinner stares at the Vulpine Sinner that had a hand in his death, more specifically the pair of weapons he was now holding. In Naruto's hands were a pair of sickles. The crescent moon blades glowed in a white light with black and red etchings along the surface and handles. Before the hillbilly cannibal could react, Naruto swiftly moved his arms. The glowing blade sang in the air as they swiftly struck Ralphie's forearm. From the contact, power and speed, the blade swiftly cleaved through the limb. Blood momentarily seeped out while the rest of the wound was more or less cauterized. Before the sinner could even process the loss of his limb, Naruto was on him. Flipping the weapon about, the handle shifted as now the curved blade covered part of his hand like a knuckle guard. He then launched his fist forward like a punch and essentially clocked Ralphie's head with a savage strike. The blade went in deep, having the hellbilly cannibal howl. Before he knew it, another sent his way and struck him hard. Instead of cutting into his face, it was a harsh swipe across the neck which had Ralphie collapse over unresponsive and dead. To really prove the point, the cannibal's body began crumbling into dust. "Ralphie? Daddy?" Martha and children yelled in shock at seeing the husband-father apparently killed so quickly. However, before they could even react beyond this, Naruto was on them in the blink of an eye. The son was cleaved in half at the waist from one sickle, before an upward slash from the same sickle split the boy's upper torso in half. The daughter had the blade of the other sickle curve upward and pierce through the underside of her jaw, before a swift tug had it slicing through her face and head. Moments later, as they died, the bodies also were destroyed, turning to dust much like their father had. Martha just stood there, rooted in place by the absolute shock of what she had just witnessed. Before she could retaliate or flee for her life, she suddenly had her surroundings shift. Not like she was knocked back, but because she had a loss of balance. It was only moments after did she fall to the ground and the pain finally registered to her brain, having her wail. She tried to get back up, but she found herself hardly able to. Moving her neck downward, Martha saw the reason why. "My legs." She then felt searing pain with what came next, as her arms were cleaved off seconds later when she flipped onto her stomach and tried to crawl away. "Motherfucker." The psychotic woman, now sinner, cried out in agony. "Never slept with any mothers in my life," Naruto said with a drawl. "Or any woman for that matter," he says blandly with a flick of his new blades. Madeline perked up a little when hearing that particular detail. "He's a virgin. I would have thought he'd slept with a few girls. He is handsome, both as a human and wait, why am I thinking of that?" The sinner thinks to herself before shaking the rapidly increasing and naughtiness thoughts from her head. "Since you're new down here, Martha, I feel as though I should let you know of something important." Naruto leaned forward, having the sickles come uncomfortably close to the satanic cannibal. "Yearly, sinners like us are hunted down by the heavenly host. Reason why is essentially simple. We are essentially immortal." This drew Martha's attention considerably. "We don't age, we can supposedly still reproduce, albeit rarely, and we can often recover from many wounds, even life-threatening. A means to show we must serve out our punishment here in hell like an eternal prison sentence. Yet many individuals over the years can get more powerful as time goes on." Part of the blade touched her face, having it burn to the touch like she was touched by a branding iron. However, there's a means to rectify all that. Withdrawing the blessed blade from her face, he cleaved through Martha's arms, fully severing what little was left of them, having her howl in agony. "Weapons such as these can truly kill us," he says in a deathly tone that sends shivers down Martha's spine. "What are those?" Madeline asked from the side, feeling nervous in seeing the weapons in action. "Blessed blades. They're quite valuable in hell. A few overlords and obviously the royal families of hell have a monopoly in gathering and reforging the angelic weapons the exorcists sometimes leave behind in the annual purges," Naruto states, pressing the sides of his sickles to Martha's wounds, searing them shut and causing the now quadruple amputee sinner to howl in agony. Naruto then proceeded to flip one of the bladed weapons slightly, bringing the weapon to the former teacher's handle first, with said former teacher looking at it quizzically. "Naruto?" she asks in confusion, not understanding the gesture. "I think you deserve this," was his response. "Taking her out, I mean," he adds with a nod of his head towards the squirming form of Martha. "What?" Madeline asks in shock and confusion. "You said you wanted to kill her properly, right? Well, this is as good as any opportunity." He glances back to her. "Would you care for the honors?" he offers, giving the sinner a chance at both justice and revenge, directed at the source of her misfortune. Hesitantly taking the weapon into her hand, Madeline soon looms over Martha with wrath practically flowing out of her. Her grip tightens considerably, which was reflective on her teeth gritting against each other. You took everything from me. My children, my career, my reputation, my marriage." She lists off, visibly shaking in rage as she does. "Oh please," Martha laughed aloud, "your husband was cheating on you for a long while. Not just with me but others," she says with a smug grin to the grin on her face, despite the situation she was in. In fact, it had been through a friend of hers, who had been one of the women Madeline's husband slept cheated on his wife with, that introduced the psychotic woman to the man in the first place. "I see when I see him next, he'll have an agonizing death," Madeline states coldly with her bangs shadowing her eyes. As Madeline raised the blessed weapon above her head, primed to deliver the finishing blow. Seeing this, Martha just started laughing manically, as with a hard downward swing, the blade sunk deep into her head, ceasing her laughter forever. There was some difficulty in prying the weapon out of the head, causing the former teacher to stomp on the neck, heaving and prying the blade harshly out of the new corpse in a bloody mess. Soon after, the cannibal's body crumbled into dust. "Madeline?" Naruto asked before he heard her begin crying. It was soft, rather light. Practically sniffles. "You okay?" She turns and hugs him, burying her face into his chest. "Thank you, Naruto," she says in heartfelt thanks for giving her the chance of having a form of closure. It was during her burying of her face in his furry chest that she noticed the large red X on his chest buried beneath his fur. The female sinner remembered what Naruto had told her about how sinners all had a red X somewhere on their body, signifying the blow that killed them. The exception being if the death was something that didn't leave a mark, like say an overdose or if someone hung themselves. In other cases, a sinner wouldn't gain an X on their body and instead they would gain an attribute of how they died. He had actually heard a rumor once that a sinner would tend to get a water belly if their death involved drowning, though he actually had yet to see if it was true. "He's so toned," she thought with a brief smile. "So warm." She ends up sniffing him, not on purpose, but it just flowed. And his smell. A small smile graces his lips. "You're welcome." He would have enjoyed the embrace more when he ended up feeling a slight stinging sensation from his back. "Hey, be careful with that." Madeline quickly broke the embrace, laughing awkwardly as she forgot she still had Naruto's weapon in her one hand. She handed it over, which he carefully took. Glancing to the weapons, a thought crossed her mind. Where do you think she and her family went? From a blessed weapon? There are theories. Some people believe they are truly purged as they're wiped from existence. Others believe they wound up in purgatory, limbo, or the great void as others call it. Naruto says with a sheepish scratch of his cheek, as nobody really had an answer as to what happened to a sinner killed by a blessed weapon. In his opinion though, it was more than likely that whoever was killed by one was simply wiped from existence, as it made the most sense in the grand scheme of things regarding the annual purges. Giving a brief nod, Mayberry thought more now with what just occurred. She finally had her final vengeance on Martha. She can move on now with her existence. Though after hearing those final words from that cannibal, she'll have to find her ex-husband and finish things off at some point. Until then, I'll just live things out. She glances over to Naruto, who's walking back to the fallen packaging some feet away. And I'll have some happiness along the way. She thought to herself with a small smile on her face. Going back into the broken package, Naruto cleared up the mess a bit to see a few other pieces were in the ruined container. One was a harness to sheath and contain his new weapons on his person. A pair of stylized leather gloves. The other was a whetstone for the blessed blades. Lastly was a note written in Octavia's hand. "Hope young and old moon will work well for you. Not just your assassin job but being a bodyguard. Your friend, Octavia." The note read. Smiling, he pockets the note and pulls out his hellphone. Taking a pic of the blessed sickles, he sent it and a quick text to Octavia. "I love him." A response was received moments later. "I thought you would." The avian demon replies with a winking smile emoji, getting a chuckle from him. Slipping his new gloves and harness on before pocketing his complimentary blessed whetstone, Naruto sheathes young and old moon before heading back to Madeline. "Are you still up for dinner?" he asks with a grin, extending his arm out to her. Madeline comes up to him halfway before looping her arm around his. "Most certainly," she says with a smile before the two walk off to do just that. So this part ends here. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, so quickly like this video for second part of this series. And comment down below your thoughts about this series. And now it's time for me to go.